Morning, man.
Good morning, Cuauhtemoc. How are you?
Fine.
Good. Did you get my feedback?
Yes, yesterday.
Okay. The way that I'm grading the feedback for each individual project is obviously I'll be making feedback comments in Microsoft Word. You did receive the Microsoft Word document? Okay. And what I'm expecting is based on the feedback, I'm going to give you time, obviously, until May 23rd. You'll have that amount of time to make changes and improve each of the products, not only your literature review, but each of the method section and results and discussion. So if you have questions or doubts, or we need to discuss anything about the feedback or your literature review, just let me know. We can discuss those, and you can send me emails in Canvas if you're not sure about the feedback that I'm providing. But the idea is that you improve your work for that first draft for May 23rd. May 23rd, I'm going to look at the whole document and grade it again. Okay. And if you have made those changes, you're going to have a better outcome on May 23rd, right? And I will go back and adjust each of the individual grades based on that first draft. For me, that's the final grade. Okay, not only for that product on May 23rd, which has more weight than the rest of the products, but each individual one. So I'll go back and make those changes. So it's very important that you make those changes, that you understand the feedback that I'm giving, that you make those changes by the 23rd of May. I would prefer that you do it now while it's still fresh in your mind, that you try to clean up as much as you can the literature review right now, so you can focus your efforts more on and now the instruments, the design of the instruments, and the data collection process. All right, so take a look at all those, the feedback, and just let me know if we need to discuss something specifically about your literature review or any other products that we graded throughout the semester, and we can certainly do that.
No, I think the suggestion that you mentioned on the feedback was clear.
Okay. Okay.
Was clear.
All right. So now we need to be thinking about the design of the instrument. So we have 4 weeks to do this. Now we need
until March 27th.
Let's see. Yeah, March 28th, somewhere around there. 27th, 28th. Yeah. So let's take a look at your research questions. Okay, so we have here, how do teachers apply cognitive strategies that promote social interaction? How do students perceive the way in which the teachers promote cognitive strategies for reading comprehension? All right, now you also have another question. How do teachers apply cognitive strategies to assess reading comprehension among language learners? Okay. All right, so what kind of instruments are you considering for your data collection to answer these questions?
Observations.
How many teachers are you planning on observing?
I don't know, I think at least 3.
What else? Observations?
Okay, based on that third question, I would like to apply maybe a questionnaire for children, how they perceive the use of cognitive strategies.
Are you focused on children?
No, but it could be useful information or use.
Do you have a preference for choosing children, or
no, for teaching? I want to be focused on teaching.
Right, but you have here your third question. How do students perceive? So, are you focusing on students, children, or
yes, no, children?
Okay, and why children?
Because they are going to work with the cognitive strategies the teachers are going to apply. So I would like to know how students, well, what the
Children.
students think about
The children.
children.
Okay.
But I don't know if you see this
Well,
correct or not.
well, the thing with, if we focus on our children only, obviously we're limiting. First of all, we're limiting. So let's discuss that here in a few minutes. All right.
Okay.
Let's figure out how we're going to choose our teachers.
Okay.
So
Because I thought about to apply observations to teachers and interview teachers,
but how are you going to choose your teachers?
looking for them.
How?
Maybe in the STAR program.
Okay. So we're going to focus only on teachers in the START program. And the START program goes until secondary school, correct?
Yes. Just secondary school is because it's STAR and then it's keep on or keep. I don't remember the name, but it's the STAR program.
Okay.
Because actually in high school is Millennium, I think so.
Has that started, the Millennium program?
I think so.
Okay. So, does the START program or the federal program, do they stress cognitive strategies? Is that part of the planning? Is that part of the expectation they have among all teachers? Because here's the thing, you need to find teachers who are explicitly using cognitive strategies. And that we have to, if you think if you think that all the teachers are doing it, you just choose. If they're not, then you need to find a way to filter and determine which teachers are using it and which teachers aren't. One way to do that is to do a questionnaire and apply a questionnaire to several, a lot of teachers. For you to look for those teachers, those 2 or 3 teachers that you can focus on. But you want to ask questions in the questionnaire that maybe don't really explicitly ask about cognitive strategies, but that ask questions that allow the teachers to respond and give examples of cognitive strategies if they're using it. See what I mean? So you're asking questions, general questions about their teaching, about how they're teaching, and maybe techniques that they're using, so that you're not, because if you mention a lot about cognitive strategies, they're going to know kind of what you are going to be observing, or what you're researching, which, is not necessarily a bad thing, but at the same time, if they don't know what you're observing, then they're more likely to be doing something that they normally would already do. Right? So we need to think of maybe a questionnaire that you can apply to, and I would, think about maybe just elementary teachers, or do you want to focus on elementary? And we need to try to kind of narrow down our scope. Unless you want to compare one teacher who teaches in primary school with a teacher who teaches in secondary school, compare how they apply different cognitive strategies differently. In the questionnaire, you might ask very general questions about strategies only, and just ask, what strategies do you use? Not mention cognitive, because they're different strategies, and they may mention examples, and then based on their examples, you determine, are those cognitive? Are those the type of strategies that
it doesn't matter if they mention some strategies that are not related to the ones that I mentioned.
Well, the idea is to find teachers that are doing cognitive strategies that you are focused on in your literature review. That's the purpose.
Because, for example, I mentioned in my letter review clarifying, questioning, predicting, questioning. So
right. Now, a lot of those most teachers are going to be doing, like questioning, and so
summarizing.
Right. So I don't think you're going to have a problem finding the teachers, but I think this questionnaire will just give you some additional reasons for choosing two teachers because, or two or three teachers because you need to have a rationale behind choosing your participants. You're saying the examiners may ask you, why did you choose these two teachers? And you need to be able to say, I chose these two for this, and that your answer is going to come from the questionnaires. So maybe you just have very general, short questionnaire about strategies.
Okay.
How do you apply them? When do you apply them? How often?
In general.
In general. And
Not
don't mention
specifically with cognitive
metacognitive,
strategy.
don't mention cognitive, affective, no. Just strategies.
Okay, you said
Teaching strategies.
Okay, apply general questionnaire. Then select all those teachers.
Okay,
who-
I'm sorry, while I'm remembering. Make sure you indicate teaching strategies,
Okay.
not learning strategies, like teaching strategies that they do
Teachers
to help. Okay, so, all right, your question, sorry.
Okay. You said I first need to apply general questionnaire to some teachers, then to select all those who practice what they do those cognitive strategies.
Yeah, you're going to look at the results
Mhm.
of the questionnaire, and you're going to be looking at the types of strategies that they mentioned and ask, does that fit into your research?
Okay.
And then the second thing is you're going to be looking for two teachers that are unique or different in some way. Something that is out of the ordinary, because this is going to be kind of you're going to be doing a case study. And so you need to be choosing two teachers in this case that are different in some way, something that's interesting that you want to find out more about, but that they show based on their answers, they responded a little bit differently than everybody else.
For example, that questionnaire, is it gonna be included on the in the final paper?
Only the results of the two or three teachers that you choose.
Because you said, for example, the examiners can say, how do you select those teachers, or why do you select those teachers?
Right.
You can say, well, because I apply a general.
Exactly. Yes. So yes, it will be part of your analysis, but only the results of the two or three teachers, because you're going to have results from, let's say, 10, 15, 20 teachers, maybe more. I don't know. But you're not going to use all of the data. You're going to analyze all the data very quickly and say, okay, I'm going to choose these two from these 15 teachers. I'm going to choose these two. All the 13, the rest of the 13, the information you're not going to use. But you are going to use the questionnaires, the results from the questionnaires of those two or three teachers that are your participants for your study. So yes, you will be using that, and that'll be one data source. Okay, so we have to be able to triangulate our information. So we have to have different data sources. So one data source is going to be a questionnaire. All right, so we have questionnaires. Okay. Now the questionnaire, after you choose your two or three teachers, then you may do some observations. Now the observations need to be recorded, so you have to have. Now, based on the type of strategy, you need to decide whether it's going to be a video recording or an audio recording. But if some of the strategies, if you think it would be to your advantage to have the video, to be able to have the visual, then you need to have the video. Otherwise, just the recording.
Okay.
So you'll have the recording, and you're also going to have field notes or an observation sheet. So the observation sheet is where you're going to be actually writing basically what you see. And I tend to suggest you can use whatever works for you, but one very simple observation sheet is begin with a sheet with a header, so you have a heading where you have just basic information about the teacher, the day, the level, the location or the school, institution, and then below what I would recommend is something like time and activity and description. Now, when you begin observing, you're going to as soon as they start, whatever it is, you write down the activity. You just classify it whatever makes sense for you. Okay, this is just for you to recall. Let's say that the teacher starts with roll call. So they call attendance. And there's really nothing to really describe. They're just calling roll. They finish at 8:03. Then you write out again time, activity, description.
Every single stage of the class.
And you have 8:03, and now they do some sort of warm up.
Okay.
So let's say it's a warm up here, and then you describe what you see. The teacher writes on the board. The teacher walks across the room. The students reply. You're just writing constantly, whatever you observe. It's not an analysis. You're not analyzing. You're not saying what the teacher feels or what you think the teacher feels. You're simply writing down what they do and what they say, both the teacher and the students, as best you can. All right, and you do this in blocks. When that one subsection finishes, it's 8:10 maybe, and you start another one. And you're going to have different blocks per lesson, right? And you continue with this, basically writing as much as you can, as much detail as you can. With your field notes and your recording, later you sit down and then you analyze. But do not analyze whenever you're observing. You just want to write what you see only. Okay? Because you want this to help you remember what you saw. That's what the purpose is. But it's not to analyze. Okay? So be very careful not to mix that, because if you start analyzing, you're going to miss something. Because you can't analyze and observe at the same time. It's difficult. So just observe. You'll have the recording. Okay? And you'll probably have some interviews, right? Now, the interviews are going to be based on your research questions, and so you'll be asking teachers about strategies. Now, what I would recommend would be to do some interviews after you observe, not before.
Okay.
When you observe, when you start doing your observations, I would not discuss in detail much about what you're researching. Because you don't want the teacher, the teacher may know something about strategies because you're asking about strategies, but just leave it at that, so that the teacher's doing pretty much normally what they would do if you weren't doing research there. So they're, so that once you observe, then based on your observations, your field notes, you think about certain questions that you want to ask in the interview based on what you saw. Okay, I would try to base everything on what you see, what you observe in the class. You could also ask, does this normally happen? Which would then be a question about what they normally do. But stick mainly to what you observe. You say, I noticed that you did this when the students do this. Okay. Why did you do that? All right. Is that, and you can ask questions about, let's see.
Okay, well, before continuing, I have a question. All this is going to be focused on reading and a reading activity, because my lit review is based on that.
Okay, yeah. And in fact, okay, so in your questionnaire, that's going to be a question. So you need to include strategies for
reading comprehension.
Teaching strategies for reading comprehension. Yeah. So here you can choose those teachers who are using it.
Okay.
And you need to ask questions in the questionnaire. How frequently do you apply this? So I forgot to mention that. So make sure you include that in the questionnaire so you're certain that you find the teachers that are using the strategies for listening comprehension. Now, when you observe, you may need to ask the teacher if there are certain days where he or she is going to be doing a listening activity.
Okay.
Okay, or if they integrate listening with other skills, that's fine too. But that needs to be part of your. I would ask them beforehand, so that if they say they practice listening every day,
Yeah.
well then that's fine. You can observe pretty much any day. If they say no, we practice more on Mondays. We practice listening or whatever. Then you know those are the days. But I would have a conversation, or at least ask questions in the questionnaire about how often they do it, so that they give you that information. If they don't give it to you in the questionnaire, then you need to ask them. Okay, so we have the questionnaire, we have the interviews and the observations. I think this will be enough to triangulate our information. We have 4 different data sources because we have the recording and the field notes for observations, we have the questionnaire, and we have the interview guide. Now the interview guide, we can develop that a little bit later once you have started your data collection process and you've observed some classes already. Okay, so for us, for our purposes, for these first 4 weeks, the first thing is the questionnaire. And I would come up with an observation sheet. Okay, make sure you have recording devices that you can use. If you can get 2 recording devices, better. But at least 1, obviously. But if you can get 2, just in case 1 doesn't work, or it doesn't, and maybe you position the recording devices in different parts of the classroom. But you need to be thinking about that. Also, something very important: make sure that you have the permission that you need if it's needed. Make sure you know which school you're going to observe and whether or not they require special written permission for you to do your research. Some schools require that.
Yeah.
If they require it, do they require it in your case?
I don't think so.
Well, double check.
Okay.
And double check is now, like this week or next week.
Okay.
Because if they do require it, then you need to start that right now, that process. Ask them if they have their own special format. I know we have a few formats here in the language department. But do that now because that takes time. It's going to sit on somebody's desk. Somebody's going to have to sign it. And you're going to be dependent on them. You're going to have to wait. So I would recommend doing that right away, immediately, if you think that that's required. Find out for sure. And as soon as you have your research, your questionnaire finished and your observation sheet ready to go, bring them in. We'll look at it, and then we can start our research. We can begin. We don't have to wait, 4 weeks. If you have something done early, then that'll give you more time for the data collection. But I'm going to go at your pace. If you want to come and show me something before our next tutoring session, before next Friday, that's fine. Bring it by. We'll look at it. But take advantage of this time. We've got 4 weeks. If you can do it in 3, better, and have another week for data collection. That would be good.
Okay. Just a final question. The questionnaire that I'm gonna apply, it's gonna be because you mentioned secondary school. You want to compare or?
It depends on what you want to do.
Okay.
If you if you want to focus, based on the results of the questionnaire, you're looking for 2 teachers. I think 2 teachers are enough. But you want to look for 2 teachers who are unique, that are really different. So you decide how many teachers you want to apply this. The more the better. But you need to decide logistically how you want to do this. Are you going to go to one school only and look at only secondary schools? Or are you going to look at one school and look at primary and secondary? Or you're going to look at 2 or 3 different schools, only secondary, or whatever. You just decide. But the point is, you need to be able to find 2 teachers that you think are going to give you the information for your research. And the more that you can do, the better. So if it takes, a full week of running around, sometimes it's hard. You got to go around each teacher and wait and ask them to fill it out. Some are going to want to fill it out, some won't. So you just have to keep applying and sometimes keep asking, and you have to physically go to different places to get this information. But it's it's worth getting this information so that you have those two teachers that are first going to give you the information that you have, and second, they're willing to do the research. They're willing that they participate in your research. And that should be another question in your questionnaire. Would you be willing to participate in a study for 3 or 4 weeks and participate in 2 or 3 interviews? If I can observe your class, may I use a video to videotape, etc. And obviously if they say no, well then you rule out those teachers. But if they say yes and then they give you the information, then you're more prepared to choose 2 participants that are ideal for your research, that are unique, that are different in some way.
Okay, so I'm gonna start working with that general questionnaire about the strategy, general strategies.
Okay.
And I'm gonna send you an email on Canvas to check the questionnaire.
Okay.
I think on this week, before the tutoring session, and to start applying and looking for the teachers.
Right, and you have a question about students,
Yes.
and so how do they perceive the way in which the cognitive strategies? You may have another questionnaire for students. Now these will be the students from the 2 groups that you choose, and so you may need another questionnaire for those students. Very general questions though, that are related to reading comprehension and how they feel about the activities that they do. I wouldn't mention cognitive strategies because you're not going to know what cognitive strategies are. But it should be general questions about how they feel, how they like the activity that they did, one that you observed, perhaps. Another option would be to interview instead of a questionnaire. Just choose 2 or 3 students and interview those 2 or 3 students. Okay. Probably the problem with you're not going to know which activities to ask them about in the questionnaire. So, did you have a questionnaire in particular that you wanted to apply? No? All right, so maybe just some interviews. And from your observations, maybe you want to choose. You need to have another reason why you chose these 3 students.
When I failed last semester, well, a year before, a year ago, sorry, I applied a questionnaire related to reading comprehension as well. And some of the questions I applied were related to, for example, what they imagine when they see images on the reading, in the reading text, or how do they feel when they read, or something like that. But I think it's not useful information for this.
Yeah, because this will be a different group.
Yeah.
But the thing with the questionnaire is it needs to be related preferably to something that you observe. So if you see something that you observe, you could then create a basic questionnaire and apply it to all the students. But I would prefer that the information stick to an experience that you observed as the researcher, and something recent for them, and see how they feel about that. So think about either an interview with 3 or 4 students where you choose different students for a particular reason, based on something that you observe or something that the teacher tells you, or an interview. I'm sorry, a questionnaire for to all the students, but one that you design later after you observe a class or 2, because you want to ask again specifically about an experience that you observed in your research. So. Yeah, I think we can begin with that. Let's start with this questionnaire for the teachers first. The observation guide and then later
Later.
the interview guides, and maybe you can come up with a guide, some kind of a sample guide, some key questions for your interview guide. Okay, and with the understanding that it's going to be really based on what you observe, but you can kind of get some ideas about general questions that you might ask in your interview with your teachers. All right. So I think we're going to have a lot here, a lot of different types of data sources, and we may have to limit one or the other, whether it's for the students or the teachers, because you've got quite a few here. And I don't want you to do too much here so that we have just too much information. Right? And it might require modifying slightly the research questions. So I really want you to spend this first week in designing your questionnaire. I want you to look at your research questions again and look at how you would, the types of information that you need, and ask yourself if you might need to adjust slightly some of your research questions, right? Thinking about all the different data sources that you're going to need to answer those. Because you have 2 questions for teachers and 1 for students. So you may need to limit that down just a little bit more to narrow it down into something a little bit more manageable for our purposes.
So, talking about social interaction, I had to see the way in which include social interaction as well. Or?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Do you want to talk about how far in depth, or can you talk about social interaction within the context of the cognitive strategies? Maybe mix those, combine those two. Okay. So I went for next week. Look at that. Reconsider your research questions. Think very specifically about your instruments, and bring in next week whatever you can complete, whatever you can finish up and present for next week. And then we'll take a look again at your research questions and your instruments that you have, and we'll go from there.
Okay.
Alrighty.
Okay.
Okay, Cuauhtemoc, so we'll see you then next week.
Next week. If I finish that questionnaire before the next tutoring session, I'm gonna send you an email.
Yeah, send it to me, or come by if it's if you're here. It might be just as easy to sit down for a few minutes and take a look at it. Okay. Because sometimes it's easier because I can ask you questions. Sometimes I'm not sure, and so sometimes we can work faster if you have the time to come in here for a few minutes. That way you can clarify, and you can be clear about what I ask. Okay, because sometimes when I look at something, it depends on what you really want to do, and so sometimes it's easier if you can come by. We might be able to save time, but if not, send it to me and I'll send questions back to you.
It's a little bit difficult for me to come because I
Okay.
live in another place of the city.
Okay, well then just
if I can, of course, I
okay,
can come.
that's fine. Otherwise, just send it to me, and if I have questions, I'll ask, and we'll just correspond back and forth.
Okay.
All right,
Well,
see you.
See you.
All
Have
right.
a nice weekend.
Thank you. You too.